Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 23 of Death Space Filling the Void. It was really nice to get a week off from posting podcasts to just enjoy Thanksgiving. Hope yours was great. Jamie and I went up to Minneapolis, to spend time with Jamie's grandmother, Barbara. It was great. Very long drive from Charleston. But we like to break it up and we like to see different places and check things out, and so that was fun. We stayed on the way there. We stayed in eastern Tennessee in the Appalachian Mountains. Appalachian? I don't know. I've heard it both ways. And then a little corner of northwest Illinois before popping into Minnesota. And on the way back, we stayed northeast of Indianapolis. It was like Upland, Indiana or something like that. And then Asheville, North Carolina is my first time checking out Asheville. A lot of fun. Very hipster. Which I'm okay with. I'm into it. A lot of green space, a lot of breweries. I mean, what else more could you want? But yeah, happy to be back. Well, I do have a bit of exciting big news to share, and that is that Jamie and I are engaged. Yeah, it happened about a month ago. I got down on one knee at Sullivan's Island Beach here in Charleston. It's the beach that we like going to and we've had a lot of fun at, so felt like the right place. I hired a photographer and a makeup artist, and we took a lot of amazing pictures in the Battery in Charleston and up Rainbow Row, and I'm so happy we did. The pictures are fantastic. Ate some great food after, and I'm extremely lucky and happy. So yeah. Oof, that'll make you anxious, huh? Proposing. But thankfully, Jamie said yes. Well, we've got another wonderful episode today. I interviewed Katie Stern. Katie is the executive director and co-founder of the Little Fox, Toby's foundation. Katie and her family unfortunately lost their son Toby to SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. Something I didn't know a ton about. Katie had a lot of information about SIDS and was so open and honest about her and her family's grief and the moments surrounding Toby's death. It's a very emotional story, and I'm super thankful to Katie for sharing it. I think it'll help a lot of people who, unfortunately, SIDS has touched their life in some way. And also, the Little Fox Foundation can certainly help put parents' anxieties or fears to bed a little bit with the monitors that they're providing families, as well as the education available on their website. But don't worry, I'll let Katie explain all that in the interview. But before we get there, I just want to remind you that if you're liking the show, to please remember to rate and review it, and to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. All right, dusting the cobwebs off after a week off. Thank you so much to Katie. Thank you so much to you, and enjoy. Joining me now on the podcast is Katie Stern, who's the executive director of the Little Foxes Foundation. Katie, I'm so excited to talk to you.
Thank you, Pat. It's so great to be here. I'm really excited for the conversation today.
Yeah, absolutely. We connected over social media in relation to SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. Yeah, I'm curious. I don't know a ton about SIDS. Do you know how prevalent it is? Or, I mean, other than knowing what it is, I guess I'm a little bit in the dark.
Yeah, so SIDS, actually sudden infant death syndrome, or it's sometimes referred to as sudden unexplained infant death syndrome,
Mm-hmm.
so it can be called SIDS as well, is something that happens to at least 3,500 infants each year. And so it is definitely something that is still such a hard topic for parents to talk about who have gone through it. And it is commonly between the ages of 0 to 12 months old.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you can imagine, having to experience something during that time period of an infant's life is just tragic. For the reason of unexplained, there is no reasoning, there is no research connected to why it happens. I think the thing that I, really want people to understand about SIDS is it can happen to anyone, and that is scary, but it's also very much the truth. You see and you hear about parents like us who have gone through this, and You think, I'll do everything right. I'll listen to everything the doctors tell me. No stone left unturned for our child. And that was Dan and I, my husband and I, that's what we did. And our son, Toby, who passed away from SIDS, was perfectly healthy. He was beautiful and thriving, and there was no extenuating circumstances for why he died. And I think that is, at least for me, I will say that is the one thing that I will carry with me for the rest of my life that is just so unsettling, is we just don't know what the reason is that he is not here with us anymore.
So it's not one thing. It's not like a heart issue. It could be different for each child.
Right. Yes, it
Oh
can
my
be.
gosh.
And we had a very extensive autopsy done when Toby died. It took 9 months to
Oh my
do it and
gosh.
to get the report back. And that time varies per state, is what I have heard from other families who have lost a child to SIDS and have gone through this process. But there were no flags on anything for Toby that would indicate, that it was something that was undetermined, prior to his death, or something that went undetected once he was born. It was nothing like that. And I had a completely normal and healthy pregnancy. I actually am a type 1 diabetic. And so going through pregnancies for me have been high risk from,
Mhm.
from the beginning. And I go through not only seeing, an OBGYN, but a maternal fetal specialist, and just a lot of testing and a lot of additional things that a normal regular pregnancy wouldn't have. So in terms of like being checked and making sure that we ran everything and looked at every possible angle that we could for his delivery and mine, we did that, and there was nothing. And that's the thing that is just so unsettling, because from a parent's perspective, and I have said this a lot in talking about this and talking about our journey, as a parent, you think it's your job to protect your children. You should do everything possible to make sure that they are well taken care of, that they're happy, that they're thriving, that they know that they're loved. And we did all of that. And he still isn't here with us. And so that is the unsettling part for me. And that's where there's guilt that comes along with this, because you think, in your mind that there's nothing that we could have done to save him. But in your heart, you always think, what if I would have done something different, that
Mhm.
day? What if I would have done one thing to just change the course of how that day would have gone? Would that have changed
Mhm.
anything? Would he still be here with us? And
We're
so,
so hard on ourselves for
yeah,
things like that,
yeah, we
Yeah,
are.
I know
We
you
are.
mean.
Yeah. And it's and in the same sense, we say to ourselves, don't do that. Don't go
Mhm.
down that path again, because but you can't. We can't stop ourselves from that, because
Mhm.
that's just from a parental perspective, it's what we want for our children. We want the best for them always.
Yeah. Do you think this is something that I'm picking up a little bit on from what you're saying? Do you think people, when they hear that your child passed away from SIDS, that there's almost like a bit of an accusation in how they react, that like, oh, you must have done something wrong? Is that something you feel?
Yeah, I think when Toby first died, there were a lot of questions surrounding how he had died and what happened
Hmm.
to him. And one of the things that can happen to infants, if there is something in the crib with them, or they're not put down in a safe sleep environment, they can suffocate because they, don't have the power to roll over or get out of something that may have caused that.
Hmm.
And so there were a lot of questions surrounding that, but Toby was not put down in an unsafe place. He was simply in a onesie, put down for an afternoon nap. and he was checked on, about 10 minutes prior to going back and finding him unresponsive. And he was perfectly fine 10 minutes before that. He was still asleep,
It's
still
that
breathing.
fast.
Hmm. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
imagine. Oh my gosh. Well,
Yeah.
what is that? I mean, I want to ask you about Toby, right? How old he was, like what's a fun memory that you have of him, or tell me about Toby.
We were so blessed because we had Toby he was 12 weeks and 5 days old when he passed away. Toby was born at the end of May, May 27th, and he died August 24th. And my husband is a school teacher. And
Mhm.
so he was home for the summer too. So while I was on maternity leave, Dan was home, and we have our older son at the time was Lucas. He was nearly 2. He turned 2 right after Toby passed away. So we spent the entire summer together, just enjoying summer. I mean, we did everything with those boys. We went to the pool, we went to the park, like we just made the best of being a family of 4 at that time. And I think about that now. And I mean, I have thought about it a lot because people have said to me, like, think of all the stuff that you guys did, because when you first have a baby, there's a lot of people don't want to go out. They don't want to do a lot of things. Sometimes you're just not physically able. My first pregnancy after I had Luke, our older son, I did not have the ability to do what I did when we had Toby. I just wasn't, from a health perspective, I wasn't there where I was the summer that we had Toby. And so
It's just you weren't feeling well. Your body was
yeah,
just like recovering.
I just didn't recover
Okay.
as easily as I had with Toby in that pregnancy. And Luke was a colicky baby. And
Hmm.
so there were a lot of things in the first 4 months with Luke that just weren't possible to
Hmm.
do. And when I look back on that, I think to myself, like, were we given all those opportunities, as like blessings so that we could hold on to them as things that we had got to do with Toby while he was here? I think those are the things that are just helpful to Dan and I, and our family,
Hmm.
that we got to make as many memories as we did. Toby was just such an attentive baby from the start, and he was always smiling and just really focused on whoever was with him. And again, looking back with Luke, and now we have a younger son, Zeke, even in his time during the first couple months, I often compare that time, and I think like they weren't like Toby in terms of like what their personality coming out and just being able to see him. And so
Hmm.
I just take that as a blessing for Dan and I, that we got to experience his personality, and we know who he was before he died. And so those are the things that like we carry with us up until that point. And when Toby died, Dan had just started back to school. It was about ready for school to start, the school year to start. And I had just gone back to work off of maternity leave. And so Toby was at the babysitter's, and Luke was there with him too. And I dropped them off that morning to go to work. It was just a typical morning. It was a typical day. As parents, know the mornings are crazy trying to get everybody ready and out the door for work and school and the sitters. And so I dropped them off, and I remember kissing both of them, and I said to them, "Have a good day. I love you. Be good. Dad will pick you up, and I'll see you at home." And I went to work that day, and everything changed. Toby went down for a nap at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I had gone into a meeting for work. And when I came out of the meeting, I just had a lot of missed calls on my phone from Dan, and a bunch of numbers that I didn't know. And so before I even listened to anything, I just had already known in my heart that something was terribly wrong. And so Dan had made it to the hospital before I did, because he was closer. He left school and went right there. And I was actually downtown Pittsburgh, and we live about 20 minutes outside of the city. And so I had to get there at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And
Sitting in
there's just,
traffic, I'm sure.
mhm.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
yeah. That's where the trauma and the PTSD for Dan and I comes in for that day, because you are just, I mean, I know for me, I was just in complete shock. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to do. And oh, geez, I remember getting to the hospital, and it had been about an hour or so since they had brought Toby in, and a nurse came out to get me from the emergency room, and she said, I'll take you back. And we walked back through the hallways, and I mean, I can see these moments are just ingrained in my mind.
It's
And
like time
mhm,
slows.
mhm,
Yeah.
to a complete stop. And she stood at the door of the room, and she said, "Are you sure that you're ready for this?" And her words will forever just be in my mind, because no one had told me up until that point. No one had actually said to me that Toby died. They just told me that he wasn't breathing and that he was at the hospital. And when I had spoke with Dan, Dan just said, "You need to get here as quickly as you can." And then she said that to me before she opened the door to the emergency room. And I just knew at that point that he was gone. When I walked in there, it was just Dan holding Toby. He was the only one in the room. And I just looked at Dan, and he said he died. And I feel like the rest of that time that we spent there in the hospital is so cloudy to me. Like I remember pieces of it, but not a lot of it. People coming in and out, but that is such a traumatic piece of that whole day for Dan and I, and it will be forever. And it's just, that's the part that, during the worst milestones, and just August is just really hard, knowing that we're going through that month and it's the final days that we had Toby, and getting to the 24th every year. And I think that's the trauma that Dan and I relive. And I think too, just in speaking with people that have gone through a traumatic death experience, and even when you get, so this past August, it was 5 years since Toby died. There are pieces of that day and of what we went through just in the weeks following Toby's death, that will never leave Dan and I, no matter how long we have gone since Toby has passed. And I think that timetable or time allotment for grief is so strange to me. And I think it's probably because people that haven't gone through it think that you reach a point where it's like, okay, I'm past certain pieces of it. And I just, when I talk about this in our story, I think it's so important to just stress that there is no timetable. There is no there is no past. It's like we're carrying this with us forever. And these are pieces of that day and pieces of the trauma that will never be gone from us. And I think it's the same for anyone that has gone through trauma. And there shouldn't be, from a societal perspective, I think there shouldn't be anyone telling a person that has gone through trauma that it's time,
Mm.
or you've spent enough time in this period, because there are so many different periods that we go through in different stages of grief. I think the biggest thing for grievers is that we want that acknowledged. that just because another year has gone, another month has gone, at the very beginning from when Toby died, it was for Dan and I, it was like, let's get through an hour, let's get through a day. But that was the only way that we could do it. And the only way that we could look at taking another step, because it was just so traumatic and so heavy.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for sharing that. I definitely was tearing up just hearing that. That sounds just so hard. You know, what you just described is nothing short of a nightmare, right, for a parent
Mhm.
to have to go through. You know, you talked about going hour to hour. How for someone who this unfortunately just happened to them today, how how did you both crawl out of that
Mm.
pit of despair and get back on your feet over time? How do you even
Yeah,
approach that?
it absolutely was over time. We're still doing it. I think the hardest thing with, at least for me with grief, and the I think the biggest realization was that Dan and I were both grieving the loss of our son, but we weren't grieving the same. We
Mm,
weren't feeling the same emotions at the same time. And at first, that was really, really hard. And to be able to come to that realization and to acknowledge where each of us were, where we were standing in that particular moment in our grief, whether it was sadness or anger or disbelief. It was something that we sort of had to discover through this process, and it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy on our marriage, and we both have talked about that, and we are very open about those experiences and what we went through in talking with other partners, other married couples, when you go through grief, because for us it took getting to that point where we understood that we were both going through the same experience, but at different points, to really be able to say to each other, and honestly, it was Dan that said it to me, we're not going to get through this unless we do it together, beside each other, walking with each other, helping each other. And that is something that I really think has been a just foundational piece for our marriage moving forward. Because as we surpassed year one and sort of got into, and I use the term seasons. There are different seasons of grief through the year, things that trigger certain emotions for each of us for different reasons. And I feel like when we started to get to a point where we could realize those and knew that they were coming, it was easier to support each other
mm,
and help each other through that. But at the very beginning, I just didn't know. I had no idea what I was going to do. I honestly
mm,
didn't. Like, I honestly felt as though I knew who I was before Toby died, as a mom, as a person, as a daughter, as a sister, as a friend. But I knew that I wasn't that person anymore, because a piece of me was just gone. And I didn't know how I was going to get back up off the ground for like myself. And I remember it was probably like a week or so after Toby died. We had just been very, very fortunate to have a lot of family and friends who were there for us. And quite honestly, they did things that I don't even know that they did. I mean, they took care of Luke, they took care of our house. They were just there with us. And it was so helpful because we didn't know what to do. We didn't know where to go. We didn't know where we were supposed to be. For us at the very beginning, the important thing was that Luke was taken care of, because we didn't want him to just lose the house and the love and the parenting that he was used to. And so he was our rock and he was our reason for getting up out of bed every day when you didn't want to, when you didn't sleep all night because the dark and like the nighttime was the worst for me in those beginning months. And I think it was because for Toby, when he would wake up during the night to feed and whatnot, that I was the one that was with him and feeding him, through the night and putting him back to sleep. But if all of the lights were turned out, this was just something that was like a thing for him. He wouldn't go back to sleep. So he always needed like a night light on to go back to sleep. And once he was very much asleep, like you could turn the light off, but it was just always something for him like that. And that was something that for me was a trigger, like for nighttime. I couldn't, the dark, everything being dark, that was just something that I couldn't deal with. Like it really broke me because I felt like this should be on because this is how Toby would sleep. And so for me, that was just a really hard time of day. And so I struggled with sleeping and sleeping through the night. And it took a very long time for me to get to a point where I could sleep through the night. And I just feel like those are things, different triggers that we have as grievers that we have to figure out a way to overcome to get to a point where we feel somewhat normal.
Oh man. And how are you doing now? Are you feeling managing it a little bit better?
I feel like we are. I feel like we're still very much a work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that it's the middle of September now, so we've just come out of that month for us, that core month. And so I always feel like September is our sort of recovery time because August just sucks everything out of us because we spend so much time trying to prepare ourselves mentally, emotionally, physically for just the pain that is coming on
Mm-hmm.
the anniversary of his death. And then you get through that date and you're just exhausted. And so I feel like it takes us some time to recover from that. I would feel like in the past like 2 years, Dan and I have said September is busy anyway with school getting back in session, routines, kind of changing, schedules changing with the kids and stuff. And so we try to limit really what else we do in September just because we need that time to just
Mm-hmm.
recover and not do anything at all, but be with each other and be with the boys. And so that's definitely something I feel like for me specifically, opportunities like this to talk about our story and to talk about the things that we have gone through and what we've experienced, whether that's good or bad, they've been a really helpful outlet for me because I just feel like when I talk and tell our story and talk about our circumstance, there are a lot of people that come back and say, people that we don't even know that say, your story touched me because of this, or I went through this and I couldn't talk about it. And so thank you for saying what you have. And so it's not only, I love to talk about Toby because he is our son and he is part of our life. And what happened to him and the reason that he isn't here has really shifted how our life is right now. Like, I think there are just a lot of things, there are a lot of people in our life who may not have been here had they not been put in our path after his death, whether it was for the reason that some of these people are going through grief or have lost a loved one or lost a child too and have shared their story with us, and others have just become a resource for us because they've cared, and they have taken the time to sit with us in grief. And I think that's important, and they may not have been here had we not gone through the experience that we did with Toby.
Yeah, that's so nice to have such a nice support system, and to have people in your life that have seen you guys tackle such difficult times. That's,
Hmm.
I want to ask you about how you spoke about Toby's death to Luke, but before that, I want to ask you, how did the babysitter handle all that? And do you still have a relationship with that person?
We do. She has watched Zeke from the time he's our third son, and he was born 2 years after Toby died.
Hmm.
And when we were pregnant with Zeke, we said to our babysitter, we want you to tell us if you're comfortable watching him, because we wanted her and her family are have gone through grief as well and have their own
Hmm.
level of loss, and they are they are just amazing people and have been supportive to us from the very beginning. She loves our children like they were hers, and so we have been blessed in that circumstance that is our relationship with
Hmm.
her, and that she continues to love our children, and she continues to acknowledge and talk about Toby with Luke and with Zeke now,
Oh, wow,
and
that's great.
so yeah. And so thank you for asking that, first of all, because I want to say that I think a lot of times when there are other people involved in the events of the day, people often focus on the parents, understandably so, and their feelings and everything. But when there are other people involved, I think they sometimes don't get acknowledged and their grief doesn't get acknowledged. But
Hmm.
it's so important to really recognize that and understand that they too are grieving, albeit a different way than Dan and I are, but there's still pain in their life, and there's
Oh my
still
God,
pain that they will carry, and their lives are changed from that day. And
absolutely.
so she is still a part of our family, and she's been with Zeke from the time I stayed home on maternity leave with Zeke a little longer than I had with Toby, just because of everything that had happened. And really, from a trauma perspective, I didn't want to go back to work at the same
Hmm.
time as I had with Toby and whatnot. So I was fortunate that I was able to stay home with Toby for about 5 months. And
Oh,
so
wow, that's great.
yeah, yeah, it was very much a blessing, and it was just so helpful to our family. And so when it was time to go back to work and for Zeke to go to daycare while I was at work, she was ready, and she did a very, very good job.
That's incredible. That warms my heart. I mean, as you explained the story, I didn't realize that Toby passed away in the home of a babysitter, and I can only
Mhm.
imagine just like the pain she feels
Yeah,
of
yeah,
just the responsibility factor. So that's wonderful that you guys are still together, as you put it, a family.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
we are.
If you're listening to this podcast, one of the reasons may be because you're interested in having your death or a loved one's death be celebrated in a different way, to think outside the box a little bit. I personally really like the idea of that. And that's why I'm partnering with a company called Spirit Vessel, who creates these guided, personalized ceremonies for yourself or a loved one. Well, just to give you a little bit of background, Spirit Vessel is a sister owned company that is bringing sacred ceremonies around death back into the home in a beautiful and meaningful way. I love it. I love the idea of making it more personal. And I've experienced wakes and funerals that it felt so cold, and wish that I could inject a little bit more personality and more storytelling to help the grieving process. Spirit Vessel has these handcrafted ceramic urns and personalized celebration of life ceremony packages that can be done in the comfort of your home or through webcasting services. Whether you're grieving the loss of a loved one, preparing for an imminent death, or taking steps to plan for your own death, Spirit Vessel provides resources to help you respond from your heart with creativity and courage. So basically, you can design your own creative and personalized intimate ceremony that represents the person who you're celebrating. And there's also tips to help people who are grieving going forward. So whether you're interested in the celebration of life ceremony packages, or you'd like to check out or order one of their handcrafted ceramic urns, which are so cool, by the way, check out Spirit Vessel. And if you do order anything, feel free to use the promo code DEATHSPACE for free shipping. If you're like me, it can be really hard to come up with the words to say in a card. I know, I always laugh too, because talk about 10 years of improv training down the drain. Not being able to come up with anything. But that's especially so. I don't know why I can say especially. There you go. Perfect. I can say it. During times of grief, or when someone loses someone. But thankfully, there's the Cardist Studio. There are no words to comfort in a time of deep loss, but you send a card because you care. Yeah, because as we've learned through this podcast, sending something, saying anything, is better than saying nothing. The Cardist Studio creates your message, writes it in your card, and mails it for you. See? They'll help you out. You have the intention, the Cardist has the words, bing, bang, boom. All you do is pick the card and tell why you're sending it. No anxiety, all care. For a message from your heart, but not your hands. Just sit back and enjoy your relationships. You know, you don't want to have that awkward feeling like, was that too much? Did I say too much? Am I talking too much? As I'm literally talking too much? As opposed to figuratively talking too much, Pat. All right. My inner voice is kind of mean to me. TheCardistStudio.com, thoughtful, just got easy. And better yet, you can use the promo code DEATHPOD, one word, for 10% off all orders. You ever lie in your resume? Huh? Look at me. Look at me when you're lying. No, you should never do that. That's a terrible idea. But it can be daunting to look at a job listing, see everything that you have and things that you probably don't have. But we can fix that with My Software Tutor. My Software Tutor offers 3 levels of real-time Zoom-based courses with a live instructor. So I'm going to keep you on task. They've seen it. They've heard it. They've seen the resumes. They know the holes. But they're here to help. They'll deliver practical, functional business skills in a friendly and supportive environment. It'd be funny if it really wasn't a supportive environment. Like, when are you going to understand this? Of course, that's not the case. That's just the anxiety or reliving fear dreams we had as children. These courses will increase your marketability. The job market couldn't be better right now. So it's a perfect time to invest in yourself and improve that resume. Whether you're an employee, job seeker, consultant, or contractor. You can sign up for these classes at mysoftwaretutor.com and use the promo code POD20 to save 20% off all registrations. Would you look at that? All right. Enjoy that new job. I definitely want to also talk about the decision to get pregnant again and what that may have felt like and the emotions surrounding that. But let's go back to talking to Luke and then Zeke later on, what it's like to, or how you approached talking about the loss of their brother with them.
Mm-hmm. I guess with Luke, when we came home from the hospital that evening, we came home and a lot of our family were at our house and they were there with Luke. And so he was really oblivious to what was going on, which is obviously a blessing that he didn't realize the trauma. But I remember when we came home, he was still awake and it was, I don't know, it was probably about 9:30 or so and saying like, we need to put him to bed. And so we took him up and laid him down and we did prayers with him as we normally do for bedtime. And I remember saying to him, just tell Toby good night, because it was the only thing that I could even think to say to him at that point in time. And my mom stayed with us that evening and through the night. And I just remember, I was just beside myself. Like I had no idea. I'm like, we have to tell him, like, what are we going to tell him? She just said to me, like, You tell him whatever you feel like you should tell him. The next morning, when he got up and was having breakfast, Dan and I sat in the kitchen with him. And I mean, again, this is another memory that is just like ingrained in my mind. Like I can see him sitting there in the high chair, and he was eating waffles, and Dan and I were sitting in front of him, and we were just kind of talking to him. And we said to him, we want to tell you that Toby died. And I mean, literally, Luke turned 2 weeks after Toby died. So you're talking about a nearly 2-year-old that you're saying this to. And he just kind of looked at us. And I think Dan said something to the effect of, do you know what that means? Or do you understand? Or something like that. Well, knowing that he probably didn't. We just said, that means that he's not going to be here with us every day like he has been. And Luke said, why? And we just said, we don't know. We don't know why, but he's not here with us anymore, and he's in heaven, and he's with Jesus, which means that anytime you want to talk to him, you can talk to him and he'll hear you. And he's also right here in your heart. And he pointed to his heart, and he held it for a minute, and he just looked at us, and he could tell, I mean, Dan and I were both crying, and he could tell just looking at us that something was wrong, because we hadn't shown this emotion in front of Luke before. That was pretty much the conversation, honestly. And he went through the next couple days, which were the funeral and the mass and the burial and things like that. And he did everything that he needed to do, and he was just there. But like I said, those days following, those weeks following, he became our rock, because for us, and well, for Luke, really, he didn't realize that our lives had stopped because of what had happened and because of Toby's death. So for him, as a 2-year-old, he wanted to play, he wanted to laugh, he wanted someone to sit with him and read him a book and things like that. And so for us, that's what I really go back to as he was what was pulling us forward and telling us keep going for him. And so, and from there, I will say, and we've had a lot of people say this to us, actually in the very beginning, I would say probably in the first 6 or 8 months, we would see people, run into people in different places that hadn't seen us since Toby had died. And, they'd ask about Luke, and then they'd say, oh, he's too young, he won't remember. Don't worry about him, he won't remember. And that was one of the things for Dan and I that really was no, that didn't sit right with us, because he did remember. Luke would be playing and just start talking about Toby, Toby would like this, or maybe Toby would like to play with this, or do you think Toby would like, something? And he wanted to talk about him. And so we very much kept that conversation open with Luke, and we're just open to talking with him about whatever he wanted to talk about. And there were times where he'd say, I miss Toby. Can I go get his picture from, wherever? And he'd just take his picture with him, around the house, and hold it, because he wanted something substantial that represented Toby to be with him. And for Dan and I, that was just, we knew that we were doing it the right way for us as parents and for Luke, because of the way that Luke reacted and the way that Luke just loved Toby just like he was here, just as a brother should, and talked about him in that way. When we brought Zeke home from the hospital, it was just incredible to watch Luke with him, because he was so loving, and he just wanted to be with him all the time and help him. And at that point, Luke was 4. It was also, Luke was the first to really talk to Zeke about Toby
Hmm.
when he was just a couple weeks old, just to tell him that I'm your older brother and you have another brother too, but he's not here. And just explain to him that this is the situation and you're the youngest of like
Mhm.
us. And like,
Mhm.
again, just as conversations as brothers would, and
Mhm.
so for us at that point, it was just a realization and a really heartfelt way to know that it didn't matter what we did in life or where we were as a family, but Toby would always be a part of that. And not only because Dan and I wanted it, but because Luke wanted it too.
Mm.
And so that's just been the remarkable experiences with Luke going through something such as death at such a
Yeah.
young age.
Yeah. And how old is Luke now? Is he like 6 or
He's
7?
7.
7.
Yeah. Hmm.
And does he ever talk? Does he remember, you think? Or does he talk about those times?
He remembers things that we did with Toby. Yes. Like
Okay.
he
Oh,
remembers
wow.
like going to the pool and things like that. Like he'll talk about that, especially through the summer, like this past summer, just talking about things. There's a amusement park close to us called Idlewild. We took the boys there when Toby was alive. And we still go there a lot with the kids. And we were there this past summer. He has seen pictures from that time when we were there too, and
Mhm.
knows them. And we were on the train at Idlewild, and he said, remember when we were on here, like, and we had Toby and he was here with us too. Like he remembers all of that. And for me, I feel like children children are so in tune with what is happening. They're more in
Mhm.
tune with what is happening than we as adults even realize. And their emotions are so real and just come from a place of not only love, because that's what they know, but curiosity and just wanting to know the truth. And so when I look back at the way that Dan and I explained where Toby was or wasn't that first day after he died to Luke, I just think that that was the best thing that could have come from that conversation that day, is just to be perfectly honest with him and know that he will understand the way that he needs to understand. I think that Luke will have a relationship with Toby for the rest of his life that will be very, very different from any relationship that any of us, Dan or I, or even Zeke, will have with
Mhm.
Toby. And I think that that's special. And I'm glad that he can have that and that he does have that.
Absolutely. I think I don't want to tell anyone how to handle these
Mm-hmm.
discussions with their kids, but I have to think that being honest, it allows them to sort of begin their own journey with grief that they're going to unfortunately experience throughout their life, and so
Right,
starting them on that journey feels right to me. Again, not
right.
telling anyone else how to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, you can't tell anyone, at least from our perspective. Nothing that we ever say, nor the way that we talk about it, is really to say like, this is how you do it. Because
Mhm.
if anyone that has gone through grief knows, there is absolutely no rule book or
Right.
no right path to follow of how to get from here to there. We say this and we talk about it because this is just our experience and it's what felt right for
Mhm.
us as parents. When you go through any situation, whether it's traumatic or not, just life experiences with children, you sometimes think like, oh, did I do that right as a parent? Did I approach that correctly? And you have certain situations that happen after that conversation has occurred that you can sometimes look at and say, okay, maybe we need to go back and revisit this, or maybe we need to have this conversation a
Mhm.
different way. And I just really don't think that we could have had a better discussion, or that the relationship that has stemmed from that truth at the very beginning of from Toby's death with Luke could have been any better. And I really hope and pray that as Luke grows and continues to develop into who he is as a person and what he wants to talk about and who he becomes from his journey and his childhood, I just really hope that he can look back at that and know that yes, he experienced something as a young child that no one ever wants their children to experience. And he had things taken away from him too. Growing up with a brother that's that close in age to him, that the relationship that he would have had with Toby had Toby been here, and them playing outside and playing sports and going through school and all those things that are so hard for Dan and I to look at right now. I try to think too that like Luke in his own way is carrying that and going through it alone, at this point in time, because Toby should be next to him and he's not. And so I just never want to forget that or get lost in my own grief that I am not acknowledging Luke's, because his is there too.
Right. Absolutely. And completely different, right? Yours is
Yeah.
different than the babysitter's, than Luke's. Grief takes many forms.
Yeah.
And what was it like with making the decision to get pregnant again and up through Zeke being a baby? I'm sure there were so many emotions. What was that like? Was it hard?
Oh my, yes to all of that. We didn't know if we wanted to get pregnant again. We honestly, it was such a teeter-totter for us back and forth. We always wanted to have a large family. That was from the very beginning, even before Luke was born. And we wanted, in our hearts, we knew that we wanted Luke to have someone here with him to grow up. But looking at it from the perspective of a parents, I mean, we were scared to death. I mean, I don't even know that there are words to describe the fear that you have inside of you. There's just the uncertainty of the unknown. How do we know that we're not going to have to do this again?
Yeah.
How do we know that this isn't going to happen again to us, or that something isn't going to be wrong? And you have every single question and every single thought that you don't even want to think go through your mind. And for Dan and I, it was honestly, when we found out that we were pregnant with Zeke, we really said, this is God's way of telling us that we're ready. Whether we think we're ready or not, we're ready. And this baby is absolutely 100% going to be a blessing to all of us, not only to Dan and I and Luke, but to our parents, our brothers and sisters, our extended family and friends, who again have their own piece of grief that they have gone through with the loss of our son, the death of our son. And so it was scary at first, and it was very, very emotional. There were ups and downs to it all. But I think the pregnancy with Zeke, at least for me, I feel like during that time was when I really was able to come to the realization that both joy and grief and sadness can live in the same breath. And that is something that prior to that time, 2 years after those 2 years following Toby's death, I really didn't know if I would ever feel that, genuinely feel that again. I mean, I wanted to as a person. I knew that I had felt it and experienced it before, but it just felt so dark. And so to be able to be reassured that everything was good. The pregnancy was good. We did all of the tests, even more than we had with Luke and Toby for Zeke, and getting to the point of delivery. And I feel like that for me was where the real fear came, because I knew that that was the point where he was going to be like physically with us and we were going to take him home. And then what were we going to do? Like, that's when
Yeah.
that sets off a whole nother set of triggers. And so during that time, well, I guess probably 6 or 8 months after Toby had passed away, Dan and I decided that we wanted to do something in his memory. So we started a foundation called the Little Fox, Toby's Foundation. And we had made contact with a company called Owlet. And
Hmm.
they are a technology firm who created these pieces of technology called smart socks. And what they are is they're baby monitors. They go on an infant's foot and they monitor their heart rate and their oxygen level while babies are sleeping, whether that's nighttime, nap time. When they're down resting, they have these on and they track their vitals, so that if for any reason whatsoever their vitals go outside of range, high or low, it alarms to let the parent, the caregiver, whoever know that something is not right with the baby.
Oh, wow.
And
That's
so
incredible technology.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
it's amazing. And it does not prevent SIDS, but it just gives peace of mind to parents knowing that you don't have to sit next to the baby and not sleep and watch them sleep. And your health doesn't have to be jeopardized just to make sure that your child is healthy and is okay while they're sleeping. And
Right.
so we, as a nonprofit, started donating these monitors to families across the country.
Mm.
And that started probably within a year of losing Toby. Prior to having Zeke, we had not used the smart sock. We only, were just talking about what it could do for families and the peace of mind that it provided and just the reassurance and the protection and that kind of thing. So when we brought Zeke home that first night and were able to put the monitor on him and watch that monitor and know that he was okay and know
Mhm.
that this piece of technology was going to help us, assist us get through, this time, it was just like it was such a piece of relief for us and for the babysitter, because she utilized it too. And so that was a big part of helping us go through those first 13 weeks with Zeke, because honestly, when you are looking at it and when we were looking at it from our perspective, it was like, this is the time that we had Toby, and this is the time running out that we had Toby. And
Yeah. Oh my
so we
gosh.
don't want that like happening to Zeke. And so you're just constantly living in this fear while trying to enjoy, those first months
Hmm.
with your infant, and just praying every single day that nothing happens.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you have baby monitors, but it's like, is he breathing? Is he breathing?
Mhm.
It may not
Yeah,
be always clear
right,
on things, and you'd be rushing into the room without that.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Well, how can people get involved with the Little Fox Foundation?
Yeah, so our website is thelittlefoxfoundation.org. Through our website, you can actually apply for a monitor. We are still donating monitors to families across the country. And so there's an application on there, and you submit the application and it's reviewed by us on our end. We talk a lot about safe sleep education, importance of safe sleep, how to put your baby down correctly in safe sleep environments. And so there's some educational pieces on there, and our story, the rest of our story is on there. So there, and our social media, also Facebook and Instagram, we are available there, and we post everything that we do and the families that we work with, and just the ways that we are helping and carrying on Toby's memory through those pieces and those projects.
I love that. That's such a beautiful way of channeling such a tough moment in your life to help
Thank you.
others. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, is there anything I missed related to SIDS, the Little Fox Foundation, your family, or anything that you would like to say?
No, I mean, I think we covered a lot, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about all of that. I really feel like it's important for anyone going through grief. Just keep going and know that some days are definitely worse than others, but you can get through them, and that you're not alone in grief. It doesn't matter what kind of grief that you're going through. You're not alone. And there are a lot of ways to deal with grief, and I feel like it's good and it's important and it's healthy for those of us walking through it to try different things that might
Mm,
help us. And I feel like that's really important, and it's if that reaches one person that it can help, then this is 100% worth me talking and continuing to talk about our story.
absolutely. Yeah, that's all incredible advice. Well, thank you so much for your time. I wish
Thank you.
you and your family all the best. And
Thank you.
yeah, thanks again. Man, it's hard not to get emotional listening to Katie's story. I mean, there's no reason to fight against the emotions welling up. It's a good thing to allow yourself to feel them. But yeah, I remember listening to Katie talk about it, and there were definitely tears coming out of my eyes. It's a nightmarish situation what they went through. But it sounds like they have a great support system, and I certainly wish them all the best. And yeah, please check out the Little Fox Foundation. Like I mentioned earlier, and like Katie mentioned, there's a lot of education, and they're offering things that can help parents live a little easier. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do here with this podcast too. Well, it definitely felt good to get a little break. You know, I feel a little rusty as I was connecting my microphone and remembering everything that I like to say in the intro and the closing here. But it's also good because you miss it, right? Like sometimes it's good to have a break, but then when you come back to it, you're like, oh yeah, let's do it, which is a good thing. I mean, if I was laboring through making this podcast, I don't think I'd be making it for much longer. And I hadn't had a week off since I started posting this podcast and my other podcast. That gives me anxiety, which I began posting them in mid-February. So that's a long stretch to keep going. Well, as always, thank you so much for listening. And once again, I'd like to mention and thank the sponsors. Spirit Vessel, use the promo code DEATHSPACE, one word, for free shipping on personalized urns and the Celebration of Life ceremony packages. The Carta Studio, you can use the promo code DEATHPOD, one word, for 10% off all orders. And My Software Tutor, you can use the promo code POD20 for 20% off all orders. Thanks again to all those companies. Hope your Thanksgiving was wonderful. And I'll talk to you next Thursday.